If there is one universal human experience that connects us to every civilization in history, it is the simple, often overlooked act of going to the bathroom. Yet, for something so ordinary, the ways ancient societies managed human waste reveal extraordinary insights into their engineering, culture, technology, beliefs, and everyday life. When we ask how ancient people relieved themselves, we are really asking, how did they understand health, cleanliness, comfort, privacy, dignity, and the practical realities of crowded cities long before modern plumbing existed? In the modern world, bathrooms are standardized, hidden behind doors, and equipped with technologies so familiar we no longer question them. But in the ancient world, sanitation varied wildly from place to place. Some civilizations created systems so advanced that engineers today still marvel at them. Others relied on methods that seem primitive, unsanitary, or shockingly public by modern standards. Some cultures built sewer networks beneath their streets. Others used rivers as open drains. Some developed flushing toilets, thousands of years before Europeans thought of the idea. Some treated bathroom habits with ritual significance. Others saw them as mundane or even communal activities. To begin understanding ancient sanitation, imagine living in a world without modern pipes, running water, or enclosed bathrooms. A city's population might number in the tens or even hundreds of thousands, all producing waste every day. Without proper disposal, disease spread quickly. Insects multiplied, water sources became contaminated, smells permeated the air. Managing human waste was not merely a matter of comfort, it was essential for survival. Some of the earliest solutions emerged in ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of urban civilization. As far back as 4,000 years ago, cities like Ur and Babylon had surprisingly sophisticated sanitation systems. Archaeologists have discovered private toilets in ordinary homes, consisting of clay seats positioned over vertical shafts. These shafts connected to cesspits or drainage channels lined with baked brick. Wealthier houses had more refined versions, sometimes with waterproof plaster. Although the toilets didn't flush in the modern sense, they represented one of the earliest attempts to create a designated, enclosed space for bodily functions. Mesopotamian streets also featured drainage systems designed to carry wastewater away during rains. These channels likely transported human waste as well, especially from households without private facilities. While far from perfect, these innovations demonstrate a society aware of sanitation challenges and actively addressing them through engineering. Moving from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, we encounter one of the world's most impressive ancient sanitation systems. The cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, dating back over 4,000 years, included private bathrooms connected to a remarkable underground drainage network. Many homes had brick-lined rooms with toilets that emptied into covered sewers flowing beneath the streets. Sloped drains ensured continuous flow, and removable inspection covers allowed for cleaning, an astonishing level of sophistication for such an early civilization. What makes the Indus Valley unique is not just the technology, but the apparent cultural importance placed on cleanliness. Archaeologists have found bathing platforms in nearly every household, suggesting daily washing was common. The integration of bathing and sanitation into domestic architecture points to a culture that valued hygiene long before modern germ theory. In ancient Egypt, bathroom habits reflected the environmental challenges of living along the Nile, as well as the social hierarchy of pharaonic society. Wealthier Egyptians used limestone or wooden toilet seats placed over pot-like containers. Servants would remove the waste and bury it or dump it in designated areas. Common households often used simple ceramic jars or squatted over sand-filled pits that absorbed moisture and smell. Unlike Mesopotamia or the Indus Valley, Egypt did not develop extensive sewer systems, but it did develop a wide range of personal hygiene practices. Egyptians used natron, scented oils, and regular bathing to control odors, showing that cleanliness mattered even without advanced plumbing. The ancient Greeks approached sanitation with a mixture of innovation and communal practicality. Public latrines were common in larger cities, featuring long stone benches with evenly spaced holes. These facilities were often social spaces. People sat side by side, sometimes chatting, conducting business, or discussing politics. Beneath the benches ran channels of flowing water that carried waste away. In some Greek bathhouses, toilets were integrated directly into the bathing complex, linking cleanliness with communal life. Instead of toilet paper, Greeks used small stones or fragments of pottery. Some of these pottery pieces, ostraka, were inscribed with the names of disliked politicians, creating a literal form of ancient political commentary that modern listeners may find both humorous and revealing. If the Greeks offered communal practicality, the Romans perfected sanitation into an empire-wide infrastructure. Roman toilets were among the most advanced the world had ever seen until modern times. Public latrines, often elaborately decorated, could accommodate dozens of people at once. Stone benches with keyhole-shaped openings allowed users to sit comfortably. Beneath them, a continuous stream of water carried waste into the sewer system. Rome's sewer systems, the most famous being the Cloaca Maxima, were engineering marvels. Massive, vaulted tunnels that drained storm water and sewage into the Tiber River. Though not necessarily hygienic by today's standards, these systems greatly improved urban life by reducing stagnant waste in the streets. Romans also used a tool called the tersorium, a sponge on a stick, kept in a communal bowl of vinegar or salt water for cleaning oneself. Modern audiences may cringe at the idea of sharing such a tool, but in its time, it was an accepted part of Roman bathroom culture. Meanwhile, in ancient China, sanitation practices reflected both technological innovation and philosophical values. Some early dynasties used simple pit latrines, but by the Han period, toilets with water basins appeared in wealthier homes. Archaeologists have even discovered 2,000-year-old toilet seats carved from stone, complete with armrests. Chinese texts mention the use of bamboo sticks wrapped in cloth for cleaning long before paper became widespread. Across Mesoamerica, civilizations such as the Maya and Aztec developed distinct approaches suited to their environment. In Maya cities, waste was often disposed of in secluded pits or natural sinkholes known as cenotes. The Aztecs, living in the remarkable lake city of Tenochtitlan, relied on a combination of human labor and careful engineering. Public workers, known as night soil collectors, transported waste in boats to agricultural areas where it was used as fertilizer, a surprisingly sustainable system. From one civilization to another, bathroom practices varied dramatically, but all reveal how ancient people adapted to their environments, their resources, and their cultural beliefs. They demonstrate innovation, practicality, social norms, and, even in something as universal as relieving oneself, profound differences in how societies understood daily life. When we examine how ancient civilizations approached the most basic human function, we uncover more than engineering. We uncover worldviews. For many societies, going to the bathroom was not merely a physical necessity, it was shaped by beliefs about purity, danger, divine order, and acceptable behavior. Understanding these perspectives helps explain why bathroom practices varied so dramatically across regions and eras. In ancient Mesopotamia, for example, purity and impurity were deeply woven into culture. Bodily fluids, including human waste, were considered ritually impure and potentially dangerous. This belief shaped household architecture. Toilets were often placed in corner rooms or enclosed spaces to isolate them from living areas. Clay pipes or vertical shafts ensured waste did not come into contact with clean water or living quarters. Mesopotamian texts even describe magical rituals to ward off malevolent forces believed to dwell in dirty water or sewer channels. This may seem strange today, but in a world without germ theory, spiritual explanations provided structure to the unseen threats of disease. Similarly, in ancient Egypt, bodily cleanliness held immense symbolic importance. Egyptians valued hygiene to a degree unmatched by many early societies. They bathed frequently, shaved body hair, applied scented oils, and used natron as a cleansing agent. Yet, despite their emphasis on personal cleanliness, public sewer systems were limited. Waste removal relied heavily on manual labor. Servants or designated workers transported chamber pots outdoors, sometimes dumping the contents in fields or into the Nile. The contrast between advanced personal hygiene and rudimentary sanitation infrastructure highlights how cultural priorities shaped bathroom practices. Another fascinating approach to waste comes from the Indus Valley, where the emphasis was on collective cleanliness. The existence of standardized bricks, grid-planned cities, and sophisticated drainage systems suggests a culture that prioritized urban order. Bathrooms were integrated into nearly every home, and drains were regularly cleaned by workers who accessed them through manhole-like openings. This level of civic planning indicates that sanitation was not the responsibility of individual households alone. It was a community-wide effort supported by governing authorities. In an era when many societies tolerated open waste disposal, the Indus Valley people adopted an approach that modern engineers consider astonishingly advanced. Moving westward to the ancient Greeks, we find a very different relationship to bathroom culture. Greek public life prioritized communal interaction, and this extended even into sanitation spaces. Many public bathrooms were designed as social environments. People sat together, often without partitions, discussing matters of philosophy, politics, or daily life. The Greek approach reflected a cultural emphasis on public discourse and a reduced concern for privacy compared to modern expectations. Hygienic practices were practical rather than symbolic. The Greeks used small stones or broken pottery shards for cleaning, an approach surprising to modern audiences but logical in an era without soft, absorbent materials. Greek designs inspired Roman sanitation, but the Romans elevated bathroom engineering to levels unmatched until the modern era. Rome's sewer networks, particularly in major cities, were marvels of hydraulic engineering. Gravity-fed systems carried waste through underground tunnels, while aqueducts provided the flowing water needed to flush public toilets. The Romans recognized that moving water improved sanitation, even if they did not understand microbial theory. Their practical instincts produced a functional, if imperfect, urban infrastructure. Roman public latrines also reflected a communal approach. Dozens of stone seats lined the room, allowing multiple people to use the facilities simultaneously. Decorative mosaics adorned floors and walls, and some latrines were heated or located near bathhouses. Going to the bathroom in Rome could be, quite literally, a public activity. And yet, this shared experience reveals a society with different cultural norms around privacy and bodily functions. But Roman sanitation also reveals a surprising vulnerability. Despite their impressive sewers, they lacked the concept of closed plumbing systems. Sewer gases could seep back into buildings, sometimes causing sickness. They believed harmful vapors, or miasmas, were responsible for disease. To combat bad smells, Romans burned incense, installed scented lamps, or designed sewer traps that attempted to block odors. Their solutions reveal an early understanding that waste carried danger, even if they lacked scientific explanations. Now, across the world in ancient China, bathroom culture evolved along distinct philosophical lines. Confucian ideals emphasized order, hierarchy, and propriety. These values shaped the design of homes, with bathrooms typically placed in private sections of the house, downwind from main living areas. Elite households developed early water-flush toilets using ceramic pans and water basins. Meanwhile, in rural areas, simple pit latrines remained common. The widespread use of bamboo sticks wrapped in cloth or paper for personal cleaning reflects resourceful adaptation to available materials. China's most influential sanitation innovation came centuries later: the invention of paper. While toilet paper would not become widespread until the medieval period, records show that wealthy Chinese households used soft paper specifically for hygiene as early as the 6th century. For modern viewers, this may seem like an obvious innovation, but in its time it was revolutionary. Turning to Mesoamerica, the Aztecs displayed one of the most ecologically sophisticated waste management systems of the ancient world. In Tenochtitlan, a city built on a lake, waste disposal was a logistical challenge. The Aztecs solved it not by flushing waste into water, but by transporting it away to agricultural fields. Human waste was mixed with organic material to create fertilizer, supporting chinampa farming, artificial floating gardens that produced remarkable crop yields. This sustainable cycle shows an advanced understanding of resource management long before environmental science existed. The Maya handled sanitation differently. Their cities were built on porous limestone, which made sewer construction difficult, but offered natural disposal options. Waste pits and sinkholes provided organic decomposition, though not always without contamination risk. In elite Maya compounds, some residences featured designated bathroom areas with simple drainage systems. Commoners, however, likely relied on outdoor spaces or shallow latrines near their homes. What emerges from all these traditions is a surprising truth. Ancient bathroom practices were shaped not merely by available technology, but by climate, geography, social values, religious beliefs, and political organization. No two societies approached sanitation the same way, because no two societies understood cleanliness, purity, or privacy in the same way. Some cultures saw bathroom activities as matters of ritual significance. Others treated them as purely practical tasks. Some emphasized privacy. Others saw no need for it. Some engineered elaborate systems. Others relied on the environment or social labor. All, however, engaged creatively with the universal human requirement to manage waste. And this brings us to a deeper exploration: how ancient cultures viewed privacy, shame, gender roles, and social norms around relieving oneself, a subject that reveals far more about ancient life than simple engineering ever could. To fully understand ancient bathroom practices, we must explore an aspect often overlooked in modern discussions: privacy, what it meant, how it was valued, and how dramatically it varied across civilizations. Today, privacy in the bathroom feels like an unquestionable human right. But in ancient societies, privacy was not guaranteed, not expected, and in many cases, not even considered necessary. In some cultures, relieving oneself was a private matter. In others, It was entirely communal, and in some places, the idea of bathroom privacy simply did not exist at all. This single factor, privacy, shaped architecture, sanitation design, social norms, and the lived experience of millions. The Romans, for example, embraced a communal bathroom culture that can feel shocking to modern viewers. Public latrines often consisted of long benches with evenly spaced openings accommodating anywhere from 10 to 50 people at once. These benches had no partitions, no dividers, and no attempt at creating separate spaces for individuals. People sat shoulder to shoulder, engaging in casual conversation while relieving themselves. For Romans, the latrine was a social venue, much like the bathhouse or the forum. It was a place where news was exchanged, deals were discussed, and comedic banter flowed as freely as the water beneath their feet. Modern audiences might cringe at the lack of privacy, but Romans saw bathrooms as part of public life, an extension of communal living rather than an intrusion into personal dignity. Interestingly, the communal nature of Roman toilets may have been influenced by religious beliefs. Some Romans believed that isolated waste disposal could attract malevolent spirits. By gathering in groups, they believed they were protecting themselves from supernatural harm. This suggests that the concept of privacy was intertwined with spiritual assumptions about the body and the unseen world. Ancient Greeks, too, used communal toilets. Greek bathhouses often included rows of stone seats similar to those later adopted by the Romans. Privacy was limited, though not entirely absent. In some city-states, makeshift partitions were used, but communal usage remained the norm. For the Greeks, what mattered more than privacy was efficiency and social cohesion. They viewed bodily functions as natural, and sharing the space did not carry the embarrassment modern cultures associate with it. But in the Levant and parts of the Near East, privacy was taken far more seriously. Archaeological evidence from Iron Age Israel, for example, reveals small enclosed latrines often attached to elite homes. The toilet seat, usually a carved stone with a keyhole-shaped opening, was placed in a private chamber, often separate from bathing or cooking areas. This suggests cultural concerns about ritual purity and the symbolic danger associated with bodily waste. The Hebrew Bible contains references to waste disposal practices that emphasize separation from the community. One passage instructs soldiers to bury their waste outside the camp and to cover it with earth as an act of respect toward God. This practice reflects a worldview in which waste could defile sacred space, making privacy and distance essential. Ancient Egypt displayed a mix of attitudes. Wealthier homes sometimes included small enclosed toilet rooms. These rooms were modest and functional, but still offered privacy. Common households, however, used simple pot-like containers placed in corners or behind screens. These screens were not permanent walls, but provided a sense of separation. Privacy mattered, but resources shaped how it was achieved. In the Indus Valley, the situation was dramatically different. Urban planning prioritized hygiene rather than privacy. Bathrooms were integral to home layouts, but privacy was achieved architecturally. Drains were hidden, walls were thick, and bathroom spaces were distinct. Yet communal bathing in public facilities also existed, showing that privacy was situational rather than absolute. Turning to East Asia, ancient Chinese norms reveal a more private approach to bathroom use. Archaeological findings from the Han Dynasty show that toilets were often enclosed rooms, positioned strategically to avoid offending guests or household spirits. Confucian ideals reinforced modesty, order, and propriety, making privacy in bodily functions more valued than in Greco-Roman societies. Japanese traditions, influenced by Shinto beliefs, also emphasized purity. Early toilets were positioned away from living areas, both to maintain cleanliness and to keep impurity from sacred spaces. Even before advanced plumbing, Japan displayed a cultural preference for privacy and separation that would later shape its famously hygienic modern bathroom designs. Yet, across the ocean in Mesoamerica, privacy was not always prioritized. Among the Maya, waste pits were placed outside but not necessarily concealed. Elite compounds sometimes had semi-private toilet areas, but most of the population relieved themselves in designated outdoor areas, reflecting a communal approach shaped by climate, environment, and social structure. In the Aztec Empire, public urination was punished, indicating strong social norms about where and how waste should be discarded. But privacy itself was not a stated priority. Cleanliness and order were. These cultural differences highlight a deeper truth. How people relieve themselves always reflects their broader worldview. Where privacy was valued, it shaped bathroom architecture. Where practicality ruled, communal facilities emerged. Where purity mattered, toilets were placed carefully and sometimes ritually treated. And in many societies, gender norms further shaped expectations. In some ancient cultures, men and women used the same facilities. In others, strict separation existed. In ancient Japan, for instance, gender differences shaped bathroom design. In ancient Rome, however, no such separation existed. Men and women sometimes used adjacent facilities, though not always simultaneously. Even ancient Greece, with its sophisticated urban design, maintained different expectations for men and women regarding modesty. Women often used chamber pots at home rather than public toilets, reflecting societal norms about female visibility in public spaces. But one of the most fascinating cultural clashes around privacy appears in later Roman Britain. When Roman-style communal toilets were introduced into the British Isles, the indigenous Celtic populations found them uncomfortable and strange. To them, relieving oneself was a private affair, something done alone, often outdoors or in hidden corners. Communal latrines felt unnatural. This cultural friction demonstrates how bathroom habits were deeply tied to identity and traditional norms. Privacy also intersects with the history of shame. Today, shame around bathroom functions is nearly universal, but this was not always the case. Some ancient cultures felt no embarrassment about communal toileting. Others viewed exposure as deeply dishonorable. Shame is cultural, not biological. The evolution of bathroom privacy over time reveals as much about a society as its political systems or religious texts. It shows how people understood the body, how they balanced individual and communal needs, and what they considered proper or improper behavior. But bathroom privacy is only one layer of ancient sanitation. Beyond privacy and architecture lies another story. How ancient civilizations disposed of waste at scale, a challenge that required innovation, labor, engineering, and occasionally improvisation. This leads to one of the most revealing aspects of ancient sanitation systems: how entire cities managed waste disposal when tens of thousands of people relieved themselves every single day. The solutions ranged from ingenious to alarming, and they tell us even more about ancient life. To understand ancient sanitation fully, we must look beyond the toilet seat and examine the larger, citywide challenge every civilization faced. Where does all the waste go? A single person produces considerable waste each day. Multiply that by thousands, or in some ancient cities, hundreds of thousands, and waste disposal becomes one of the most important engineering and public health issues of the ancient world. How societies solved this problem tells us as much about their technological capabilities as their understanding of cleanliness, disease, and civic responsibility. Let's return to the Indus Valley, the civilization that surprises historians again and again. Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were among the first cities in history to design large-scale sewage networks. Brick-lined drains ran beneath their streets, forming a kind of early urban plumbing system that rivaled some 19th-century European cities. These drains were kept separate from fresh water systems and even included inspection holes with removable covers so debris could be cleared. What makes this extraordinary is that the Indus Valley civilization left behind no evidence of kings, ruling classes, or monumental palaces. Instead, their resources went toward practical, communal infrastructure. Waste management was not simply a household concern, it was a civic priority deeply embedded in their culture. In many ways, this makes the Indus system more democratic than anything seen in Egypt or Mesopotamia. Egypt's system, by contrast, was shaped primarily by the Nile. Most waste went to pits or was buried in sandy ground where the dry climate helped decompose organic material quickly. Urban neighborhoods had simple drainage channels, but large-scale sewers were rare. Instead, waste collectors, sometimes enslaved people, sometimes hired workers, carried away chamber pots and disposed of the contents beyond the city or in designated dumping areas. These workers were essential to daily life, maintaining cleanliness in homes that otherwise had no means of removing waste discreetly. In Mesopotamia, cities developed a hybrid system. Some homes emptied waste into cesspits, while others had drains leading into street channels. These channels eventually connected to larger canals. Because water scarcity was a constant challenge, waste disposal often relied on seasonal rains to flush channels. During dry periods, however, waste could accumulate, creating sanitation risks. Archaeological layers from ancient cities sometimes include thick bands of decomposed waste, showing how these systems struggled under urban density. The ancient Greeks advanced sanitation significantly through public works. Drainage channels lined many streets. Some cities, such as Athens, built complex sewer systems to transport runoff and waste toward rivers. Yet the Greeks often prioritized aesthetic beauty and civic architecture over sanitation. Temples soared into the sky while wastewater flowed beneath the streets in simple tunnels. Public latrines did exist, usually attached to bathhouses, but they lacked the integrated sewer designs perfected later by the Romans. Rome, on the other hand, approached waste disposal with a level of ambition unmatched until modern industry. The Romans did not merely build toilets, they built a sanitation infrastructure for an empire. The Cloaca Maxima, constructed in the 6th century BCE, began as a drainage canal but evolved into one of the most durable sewer systems in history. Some sections still function today. Rome's sewers were fed by a continuous flow of water from the aqueducts. This meant that public latrines, private toilets, bathhouses, and street drains all fed into a system designed to keep waste moving. While the Tiber River received massive amounts of sewage, reducing urban waste accumulation, the Romans effectively pushed their sanitation problem downstream. The Roman model of mass waste removal was efficient but not truly hygienic. Rivers became contaminated, and in densely populated districts, sewer gases seeped back into homes. Romans responded by burning incense, lighting oil lamps, and designing specific architectural features to block odors. Although they lacked modern germ theory, their practical solutions show an emerging awareness of environmental health. Ancient China approached waste disposal with a different strategy. Rather than flushing waste into rivers, many Chinese communities valued human waste as fertilizer. This practice continued for thousands of years and became one of the most efficient agricultural cycles in human history. Waste collectors gathered material from households, sometimes using designated buckets, and transported it to fields where it was composted and spread on crops. This created a closed-loop system that maximized soil fertility. China's approach shows a sophisticated understanding of sustainability long before modern ecological science. While the West often funneled waste into waterways, the East used it as a resource. Even today, historians and agricultural specialists study ancient Chinese farming methods for their remarkable balance between population density and food production. In ancient Japan, sanitation was influenced heavily by Shinto principles. Purity was central to everyday life. Waste disposal needed to keep the living environment spiritually clean. Early Japanese settlements used pits for disposal, but by the medieval period, waste collection and composting systems similar to China's developed. Household toilets were placed away from shrines and kitchens, emphasizing spiritual separation. Now consider ancient Mesoamerica. The Aztecs arguably developed one of the most organized waste disposal systems in the Americas. In Tenochtitlan, waste collectors traveled the city's canals at night, gathering both household and street waste. Instead of dumping it, they transported it to fields surrounding the city where it was used as fertilizer. This nightly system ensured the city remained remarkably clean for its size. Unlike European cities of the same era, often described as dirty, smelly, and unsanitary, Tenochtitlan was praised by Spanish conquistadors for its cleanliness, organization, and odor-free streets. This contrast highlights the innovative waste management that defined Aztec engineering. Meanwhile, the Maya handled waste differently because of geography. Limestone bedrock and the presence of natural sinkholes meant they could not easily build underground sewers. Waste disposal often involved pits, which were occasionally ritually cleansed or abandoned when filled. Maya cities were highly advanced in architecture and astronomy, but sanitation was shaped by environmental constraints rather than philosophical or political choices. Throughout the ancient world, one theme becomes clear. Waste management required labor, often from people of low social status. Whether they were slaves in Egypt, public slaves in Rome, servants in China, or night soil collectors in Mesoamerica, these workers formed the backbone of urban sanitation. Their contributions were essential but rarely recorded, showing how sanitation reflects not only technology but also social inequality. Another factor shaping waste disposal was water management. Civilizations with abundant water, Rome, Greece, the Indus Valley, developed more advanced sewer systems. Those in arid regions relied on pits, jars, or manual removal. Water availability shaped everything: toilet design, waste transport, hygiene practices, and even social norms. But bathroom culture did not only reflect technology, it reflected beliefs about purity, pollution, and spiritual danger. And in many ancient societies, bodily waste was loaded with symbolic meaning. It could defile a sacred space, attract evil spirits, or even possess magical properties. Understanding this symbolic dimension reveals an entirely different side of ancient sanitation, one in which toilets were not only practical structures, but part of a larger moral and spiritual universe. The deeper we explore ancient bathroom practices, the clearer it becomes that managing human waste was never just a matter of engineering or convenience. In many civilizations, bodily functions were deeply intertwined with ideas of purity, danger, ritual, and the supernatural. Ancient beliefs surrounding waste reveal how people interpreted their bodies, their environment, and the invisible forces they believed governed everyday life. A key point modern viewers often overlook is this. For ancient civilizations, waste was not simply dirty. It was spiritually charged. It could contaminate spaces, attract harmful spirits, diminish ritual purity, or violate religious law. These beliefs shaped how societies built toilets, where they placed them, who was allowed to use them, and how waste was disposed of. Let's begin with the ancient Hebrews, whose texts contain some of the earliest codified sanitation rules. The Hebrew Bible instructs soldiers to go outside the camp to relieve themselves and to bury their waste with a shovel. This practice was not only practical, reducing disease in close quarters, but also spiritual. Waste left exposed was seen as disrespectful to God, who walked among the people. To keep the camp holy, unclean substances needed to be buried and contained. This idea of purity influenced Jewish law for centuries and had major implications for bathroom design. In ancient Hindu traditions, similar purity laws shaped sanitation practices. The Manusmriti, a foundational text, describes waste as a great impurity that disrupts spiritual order. Toilets were to be placed far from living quarters and never near water sources used for drinking or rituals. Bathing after relieving oneself was considered essential. Even today in parts of India, ancient concepts of purity continue to influence building layouts and hygiene customs. Ancient Buddhists, on the other hand, approached sanitation through a lens of mindfulness and non-harm. Early monasteries included carefully designed latrine buildings, often set apart from meditation halls. Waste was channeled into designated pits, and monks followed specific practices meant to maintain cleanliness and avoid disturbing the natural environment. The act of relieving oneself was considered a necessary function, not spiritually charged, but requiring awareness and respect. In Japan, Shinto beliefs linked impurity with spiritual danger. Waste, like blood or death, was considered kagare, a form of pollution that disrupted harmony with the divine. Toilets were therefore positioned away from shrines, kitchens, and main living spaces. Ritual purification followed contact with waste. These beliefs influenced Japanese sanitation for centuries and contributed to the development of remarkably clean and orderly systems in later periods. Meanwhile, in ancient Egypt, waste disposal had a practical side, but also a spiritual one. Egyptians believed that bodily functions were part of the natural order, but associated the elimination of waste with the god Seth, a deity linked to chaos. Some magical spells instructed people on how to cleanse themselves after defecation to avoid attracting malevolent forces. This mixture of pragmatism and spiritual symbolism shaped bathroom customs in ways that modern observers might easily miss. Even in ancient Mesopotamia, magic and sanitation intertwined. Certain demons were thought to dwell in dirty water or sewer systems. Wastewater flowing beneath homes was not only a physical hazard, but a spiritual one. Rituals existed to protect households from these unseen threats. One common practice involved placing protective amulets near the bathroom or drain areas to ward off harm. This belief may explain why toilets were often located in secluded corners of houses where spiritual contamination could be contained. But perhaps no civilization demonstrates the symbolic power of waste as dramatically as ancient Rome. While Romans are famous for their enormous public latrines and sewer systems, they also carried deep fears about the supernatural dangers that lurked in these spaces. Roman sewers were dark, claustrophobic, and associated with the underworld. Rats, snakes, and noxious gases moved through them. Some Romans believed that spirits or monsters inhabited these tunnels. Legends circulated about demons emerging from holes in the latrine floor, surprising those using the facilities. To protect themselves, Romans sometimes carved images of Fortuna, the goddess of luck, into latrine walls, hoping for safety during such a vulnerable moment. Amulets, inscriptions, and even jokes carved into toilet seats reveal the blend of humor and fear with which the Romans approached their sanitation facilities. Symbolic beliefs also shaped the very design of toilets. For instance, many early toilets faced east, the direction of the rising sun, reflecting a belief in spiritual alignment. Others were positioned to avoid offending household gods or ancestral spirits. In some societies, improperly disposing of waste was believed to bring misfortune or illness, not necessarily because of microbes, but because of spiritual imbalance. But symbolic meaning sometimes worked in the opposite direction as well. In ancient China, human waste was not inherently impure. In fact, it was valued as fertilizer and essential to sustaining life. This practical understanding gave waste a different symbolic significance, not as pollution, but as nourishment for the earth. Far from being taboo, the cycle of collection, composting, and reuse was part of life's natural rhythm. This practical symbolism also influenced architecture. Chinese villages often placed toilets near gardens or fields, integrating sanitation with agriculture. The association between human waste and soil fertility was so strong that a well-maintained latrine was considered a sign of a prosperous household. Ancient Mesoamerica offers another unique perspective. Among the Aztecs, human waste was viewed as a resource for agriculture, but also needed to be handled respectfully to maintain order and cleanliness. Aztec laws prohibited improper disposal of waste, seeing it as an offense not only against society, but also against the harmony of the city. Waste collectors held an important civic role, and their labor contributed directly to the city's sustainability. This reveals a cultural framework in which cleanliness was not just spiritual, but also civic duty. Across the ancient world, rituals also shaped bathroom behavior. Some people recited prayers before relieving themselves, others performed cleansing rituals afterward. Some left offerings near latrine pits or sewage channels to appease local spirits or deities associated with the earth, water, or underworld. These customs demonstrate that sanitation was not purely physical, it was interwoven with cosmology. Even the concept of where waste belongs differed dramatically. In some cultures, burying waste was symbolic of returning impurity to the earth so it could be transformed. In others, flushing waste into rivers symbolized purification through flowing water. These symbolic beliefs reveal a profound truth. Ancient sanitation systems were built not only from bricks, stone, and clay, but from ideas about the universe. How a society handled waste reflected how it understood life, death, purity, spirit, and the body itself. As we move deeper into ancient sanitation practices, another key question emerges. What materials did ancient people use for wiping, cleaning, and maintaining hygiene after relieving themselves? The answers range from ingenious to surprising, and they tell us much about resource availability, cultural habits, and social norms. When people wonder how ancient civilizations went to the bathroom, they often imagine toilets, sewers, or sanitation workers. But one question consistently fascinates audiences more than any other. What did ancient people use to clean themselves afterward? Toilet paper, as we know it today, is a shockingly recent invention. For most of human history, people relied on whatever was available: plant fibers, water, stones, pottery, cloth, sponges, leaves, and sometimes nothing at all. What people wiped with reveals not only their technological environment, but their cultural priorities, their resources, and their relationship to hygiene. These materials varied dramatically across time and geography, offering a surprisingly intimate window into daily life. Let's begin with one of the most famously unusual ancient hygiene tools, the Roman tersorium, the sponge on a stick. In Roman public latrines, beneath the benches that dozens of people used at once, there was a gutter of water used to rinse waste away. Next to this water channel, each latrine housed several sponges attached to long wooden handles. Users would dip the sponge into water, sometimes mixed with vinegar or salt, and use it to clean themselves. Today, the idea of a communal sponge is unthinkable. But for the Romans, sharing hygiene tools was normal. Privacy was limited, and communal resources were practical. The tersorium reveals a world in which efficiency outweighed personal sanitation concerns. And yet, despite its apparent lack of hygiene, the design was effective, soft, reusable, and easy to rinse. Other Roman wiping materials included moss, wool, hemp fibers, and sometimes simply water. Wealthier Romans might use soft wool soaked in perfume or rose water, a luxury far beyond the reach of ordinary citizens. Meanwhile, in ancient Greece, pottery shards known as ostraka were commonly used for wiping. These were small fragments of broken pots, smooth enough not to cause injury, but firm enough to clean. Some were even inscribed with the names of disliked politicians, creating a literal form of wiping away one's enemies that still amuses historians today. The use of ostraka shows Greek practicality. Pottery was everywhere, cheap, and easily replaced. In contrast, ancient China developed one of the earliest documented forms of toilet paper, though it was not widespread. Bamboo slips wrapped in cloth or paper were used as hygiene tools well before modern toilet paper existed. By the 6th century, wealthy Chinese households were using soft sheets of paper specifically for bathroom use, a practice that predated the Western adoption of toilet paper by over 1,000 years. Chinese records even describe different grades of toilet paper: coarse paper for commoners and fine, scented paper for the elite. This detail reveals how material culture extended even into private bodily routines, highlighting the sophistication of Chinese paper-making. In Japan, before toilet paper became common, people used small wooden sticks called chugi. These spatula-like tools were used to scrape clean after defecation. They were sometimes stored in bathrooms or carried in personal hygiene kits. Like many ancient tools, chugi were washable and reusable. Across the Indian subcontinent, water, not physical wiping, was the primary means of cleansing. For thousands of years, people have used water for post-toilet hygiene, often with the help of the left hand and a small vessel known as a lota. This tradition, still common in many regions today, reflects cultural beliefs about cleanliness, ritual purity, and the symbolic role of water in spiritual life. Unlike wiping materials, water offered a thorough method of cleaning, and ancient cultures that adopted this technique generally developed lasting hygiene practices around it. In the Middle East, smooth stones were among the most common tools. Desert environments offered limited vegetation, making stones the most available resource. Ancient Arabic texts reference the use of 3 stones for cleansing, a practice shaped by both practicality and ritual instruction. Sand, too, played a role, especially in nomadic communities where water was scarce. Egyptians, surrounded by river reeds, often used soft grasses and plant fibers. They may also have used water or simple cleaning tools fashioned from nature. Affluent Egyptians could access fine linens, though using valuable cloth for bathroom purposes was a luxury few could afford. The Indus Valley civilization likely combined water with natural materials. The presence of bathing areas in nearly every home suggests a cultural emphasis on cleansing. While specific wiping tools have not been found, the design of bathrooms suggests that water played a central role rather than solid materials. In Mesoamerica, the Maya and Aztecs used a range of natural fibers, leaves, and sometimes water. Large leaves from native plants served as natural wiping materials, and in resource-rich environments like the tropical lowlands, these were abundant and effective. Some Mesoamerican communities also used corn cobs, an often cited example that might seem humorous but was practical. Durable, textured, absorbent, and readily available after harvest. Northern European societies, living in colder climates with abundant forests, relied on moss, leaves, grass bundles, and animal fur scraps. Moss, in particular, was soft, absorbent, and biodegradable, a surprisingly effective material that archaeologists have found in ancient latrine pits. Vikings and early Germanic tribes used wool scraps, plant fibers, and sometimes snow. Snow, though seasonal, provided a surprisingly hygienic and refreshing method of cleansing in winter. One of the most fascinating insights comes from Native American cultures in North America. Depending on the region, people used moss, leaves, shells, and even snow. The materials reflected the environment. Coastal communities used shells, forest communities used bark or moss. Arctic peoples used snow. What all these wiping materials reveal is the adaptability of human societies. Every civilization made practical use of whatever resources were available. Whether through water, paper, sponges, or plant matter, hygiene was shaped by environment and economy. But wiping tools were not the only concern. Ancient cultures also developed ways to deodorize, sanitize, or ritualize the bathroom experience. The Romans burned incense or placed perfumed oils near toilets. Egyptians mixed natron with scented herbs. Greeks used aromatic leaves. Chinese households sometimes burned bamboo or herbal mixtures to purify the air. Many societies sprinkled ashes or lime into waste pits to reduce smell and accelerate decomposition. But one of the most fascinating aspects of ancient sanitation is how people cleaned their hands afterward, a detail often missing from casual discussions. Soap, in various forms, existed in ancient Babylon, Egypt, and Rome. In India, people used ash or clay. In Japan, salt water was common. Cleanliness was not only about eliminating waste, it was about removing the impurity associated with it. The concept of clean hands became symbolic in many cultures. In some traditions, washing hands after bathroom use was a ritual act of purification. In others, it was a practical habit without spiritual meaning. But across the ancient world, hand-washing reveals a growing awareness, even before microbes were known, of the link between waste and illness. As we examine these details, we begin to see a bigger picture. Bathroom habits offer a surprisingly rich understanding of how people lived, how they adapted to their surroundings, and how they balanced physical needs with cultural expectations. But sanitation was not only about wiping and removing waste, it was also about public health, long before anyone understood bacteria or viruses. Why did some civilizations develop advanced sewer systems while others did not? Why did some societies prioritize cleanliness while others tolerated conditions we would find unbearable today? To answer these questions, we must explore the ancient world's approach to disease, contamination, and the invisible dangers that people attempted to control through ritual, architecture, or instinct. To understand ancient sanitation, we must now examine a crucial factor that shaped bathroom practices across the world: public health, long before the concept formally existed. Ancient civilizations had no knowledge of bacteria, viruses, or parasites. Yet, through observation, intuition, and cultural habits, they developed a wide range of practices aimed at minimizing sickness. Some were remarkably effective. Others, ineffective by modern standards, still revealed an emerging awareness of environmental risks. Even without microbiology, ancient people understood one thing very clearly. Waste could make people sick. They saw patterns. They noticed that stagnant water caused illness. They recognized that filth attracted insects and rodents. They linked foul smells with disease. In many cultures, these observations translated into rules, rituals, and engineering innovations designed to reduce exposure to waste. One of the earliest documented understandings of sanitation comes from the Indus Valley, whose inhabitants, even 4,000 years ago, built cities with sophisticated drainage systems. Their sewer networks allowed waste to flow away from homes, reducing standing waste that could attract insects or contaminate water sources. While they didn't know about microbes, their infrastructure reflects an intuitive grasp of environmental health. Similarly, ancient Egyptians understood that cleanliness was essential to preventing illness. Although they lacked sewer systems comparable to those of the Indus Valley, their emphasis on bathing, shaving body hair, and using cleansing agents like natron helped reduce skin infections and parasites. Temple priests were required to bathe multiple times per day, shave their entire bodies, and maintain a high standard of hygiene. These rituals had religious meaning, but also prevented disease among those living and working in close quarters. The Mesopotamians, living in densely populated cities like Babylon and Ur, developed early drainage channels to move wastewater away from homes. They recognized that standing sewage was unhealthy, although their solutions were imperfect. Limited water flow made sewers dependent on seasonal rains, so waste sometimes accumulated, creating unsanitary conditions. The mixture of drainage and ritual practices reflects a society aware of environmental dangers, but limited by geography and resources. The Greeks advanced sanitation further by integrating public toilets and drainage systems into urban life. They built latrines connected to underground channels, allowing waste to be carried away by water flow. Some Greek cities, such as Athens, developed semi-organized waste disposal systems. However, sanitation often depended on individual households and municipal workers rather than large-scale state planning. Where the Greeks laid the groundwork, the Romans perfected it. Roman sanitation remains one of the greatest achievements of antiquity. Their expansive sewer networks, aqueducts, public baths, and public latrines were designed not only for convenience, but for public welfare. While Romans believed that disease was caused by miasma, bad air, they correctly associated filth with illness. Their solution was to remove waste from the urban environment as efficiently as possible. The Romans also created laws to support sanitation. Homeowners were required to connect to street drains where available. Public funds supported sewer maintenance. Workers called cloacinae removed blockages and ensured water kept flowing. The scale of their sanitation system was unprecedented, and while it fell short of modern hygiene standards, it significantly improved living conditions in crowded Roman cities. However, sanitation across the ancient world was not uniformly advanced. Many civilizations faced significant challenges that shaped their bathroom practices and public health. In ancient China, health beliefs were influenced by concepts of balance, yin and yang, heat and cold, purity and impurity. Sanitation practices frequently reflected these ideas. While pit latrines and waste collection were widespread, sewer systems were less common, especially in early periods. Instead, waste was often reused as fertilizer. This practice was ecologically efficient and supported large populations, but it also carried risks of spreading parasites if not properly composted. Yet the Chinese developed sophisticated methods to manage these risks. Human waste was often stored for long periods before use, allowing pathogens to break down. Some regions boiled waste or mixed it with ash or lime, reducing contamination. These practices reveal a pragmatic, empirical approach to sanitation that supported agricultural productivity while controlling health dangers. In Japan, Shinto beliefs about purity led to strict separation between living spaces and waste areas. Toilets were often placed on the outer edge of homes or in detached structures. Waste was collected and composted, supporting crops, just as in China. This approach reduced exposure in populated areas while contributing to environmental sustainability. The Aztec Empire provides another fascinating example of effective public health management. Tenochtitlan, home to hundreds of thousands of people, maintained exceptional cleanliness. Waste collectors traveled the canals each night, gathering human and animal waste for agricultural use. Additionally, the Aztecs created designated waste zones and developed rules against improper disposal. The result was a remarkably sanitary city that astonished Spanish observers. The Maya, however, faced different challenges. Their great cities were often built on porous limestone, which limited the effectiveness of latrines and sewer systems. Waste disposal typically took place in pits or natural sinkholes, which could sometimes contaminate groundwater. While not ideal by modern standards, their system suited the environment and allowed for waste to decompose naturally. Elsewhere in the world, sanitation relied heavily on geography. In arid regions, people used dry pit latrines or simply relieved themselves in designated areas far from living quarters. In river cultures, waste was often directed into water channels, out of sight, but not truly gone. These practices could create serious health risks, especially when drinking water and waste disposal overlapped. Perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of ancient public health is how societies handled disease outbreaks related to poor sanitation. Without germ theory, people turned to symbolic or ritual explanations. They blamed bad air, angry spirits, or divine punishment. Many of these explanations led to public rituals, purifications, processions, or sacrifices. Yet communities also adopted practical behaviors, cleaning streets, burying waste, or improving drainage, because they observed real improvements. Even when their reasoning was flawed, their actions sometimes aligned with effective public health strategies. But ancient societies faced one challenge that remains universal: the disposal of human waste from large public gatherings. Markets, festivals, temples, theaters, and military camps produced enormous amounts of waste in short periods. The Romans built temporary latrines for military camps, often using trenches lined with seats. The Greeks created drainage channels around theaters. The Hebrews established strict laws for camp sanitation. Chinese armies carried portable waste vessels. These methods show that bathroom practices were not only part of domestic life, they were essential to any organized social activity. And, as populations grew, the complexity of sanitation grew with it. Cities rose and fell based partly on their ability, or inability, to manage waste. Disease outbreaks shaped history. Urban decline often followed sanitation failure. Ancient people did not understand microbes, but they recognized patterns and responded creatively. Now that we understand how public health shaped ancient bathroom practices, we can explore another equally fascinating dimension: the gender differences in ancient bathroom behavior, where men and women relieved themselves, who had access to facilities, and how privacy was shaped by gender roles. Another crucial dimension of ancient bathroom culture, one that reveals deep social structures, is how gender shaped the experience of relieving oneself. Today, we take for granted the idea of separate bathrooms for men and women. In many modern societies, privacy and modesty are fundamental expectations, but in the ancient world, gender norms varied widely, influencing who could use what facilities, how much privacy existed, and how hygiene was maintained. In some civilizations, men and women used the same communal toilets without issue. In others, modesty, religious law, or social hierarchy demanded strict separation. These differences illuminate not only bathroom customs, but also the broader values and daily realities of ancient life. Let's begin with ancient Greece, where gender roles influenced virtually every aspect of public behavior. Greek women, especially in Athens, rarely spent time in public spaces without male supervision. As a result, women often avoided public latrines. Instead, they used chamber pots at home, which were emptied by household servants or family members. This arrangement reflected Greek expectations of female modesty and domesticity. Even in bathhouses, which were significant social hubs for men, women's access was restricted or separated by time. Men bathed communally, while women, when permitted, used smaller, more private facilities. The Romans, however, approached bathroom gender norms differently. Roman public latrines typically lacked gender separation. Both men and women theoretically could use the same facilities, though actual practices varied by location and time period. In many cities, men were the primary users of public latrines simply because they spent more time in public spaces. Women often preferred domestic chamber pots, especially in elite households. However, inscriptions and archaeological finds indicate that women did use public latrines when necessary. Roman baths complicate the picture further. Bathhouses were essential social environments where people gathered to relax, bathe, exercise, or conduct business. Many bathhouses allowed mixed-gender bathing at certain times, though moralists frequently complained about this practice. As Christianity spread, gender segregation in bathhouses increased, but the earlier Roman era reveals a society far more relaxed about bodily exposure than many modern cultures. Contrast this with ancient Egypt, where gender influenced toilet access in more subtle ways. Wealthy households often had small, private toilet rooms used by both men and women. Commoners relied on simpler setups, often sharing facilities within households or courtyards. Privacy appears to have been valued, though not rigidly tied to gender in the same way as in Greece. Egyptian art rarely depicts toilets or bathroom activities, suggesting modesty or cultural taboos around representing such acts. The Indus Valley civilization offers a different perspective. Archaeology suggests standardized home layouts with separate bathing areas and toilets, but evidence of gender-specific spaces is minimal. The uniformity of bathroom design in Indus cities hints at a society where sanitation was practical and not heavily gendered. In Mesopotamia, gender shaped bathroom behavior primarily through household structure. Elite homes often included enclosed toilet rooms accessible to all family members, while servants and lower-class individuals used simpler outdoor facilities. Privacy mattered, but gender-specific bathrooms did not widely exist. While ancient texts reference menstruation and childbirth as states of ritual impurity, these concerns influenced cleansing practices rather than toilet use. Moving to East Asia, gender and sanitation intersect in unique ways. In ancient China, Confucian principles emphasized modesty, propriety, and family hierarchy. Bathrooms in elite households were typically separated from living areas and used privately. Men and women did not share bathroom spaces simultaneously, though formal segregation was not always architectural. Women's movement outside the home was often limited, meaning women relied more heavily on household facilities, while men used public or outdoor spaces when needed. In Japan, Shinto beliefs about impurity influenced toilet placement, but gender-segregated toilets became more common in later periods rather than in ancient times. Nonetheless, women often had greater privacy within domestic spaces compared to men who used public or shared facilities. Gender played an especially interesting role in religious sanitation laws, particularly in the Middle East and South Asia. In Jewish tradition, menstruation carried ritual implications that shaped women's hygiene practices, though it did not mandate separate bathrooms. Similarly, in Hindu cultures, purity laws influenced where women relieved themselves, especially during menstruation. These laws often limited women's nighttime bathroom access, forcing them to relieve themselves at dawn or dusk, practices that persisted in rural regions for centuries. One civilization where gender divisions were clearly defined was the Aztec Empire. While the Aztecs developed advanced sanitation systems, including night soil collectors and designated waste zones, women and men often relieved themselves in separate areas within residences. Public urination was punishable regardless of gender, but women in particular were expected to maintain modesty. Household construction sometimes included gender-specific routines surrounding hygiene. In Maya society, gender differences in bathroom use reflected labor divisions. Men working in fields relieved themselves outdoors, far from ceremonial areas. Women, responsible for domestic activities, used pits or yard spaces near the home. Privacy barriers were sometimes used, but archaeological evidence shows minimal architectural separation. In many ancient European cultures outside Greece and Rome, gender norms aligned closely with privacy expectations. Celtic and Germanic tribes valued modesty, especially for women. Latrine pits, or forested areas, were used separately based on gender, though not always through formal rules. Roman occupation later introduced communal toilets to these regions, but adoption was uneven because local populations found them culturally uncomfortable. Interestingly, privacy and gender concerns significantly shaped sanitation in warfare. Military camps in ancient societies had designated latrine areas far from living quarters. Greek and Roman military manuals gave precise instructions about where soldiers should relieve themselves for strategic and sanitary reasons. These areas were often gender-specific, with women accompanying armies, such as cooks, camp followers, or family members, relieving themselves separately. Gender differences also influenced access to hygiene materials. In many cultures, men had greater access to public baths, while women relied on home-based washing facilities. Women often used different wiping materials than men, based on availability inside the home. In China, for example, wealthier women used fine paper, while poorer women used cloth scraps washed regularly. Another layer of gendered bathroom behavior involves pregnancy and childbirth. Many ancient societies designed purification rituals surrounding these events. Women were instructed to relieve themselves in specific areas or use particular cleansing techniques. These practices reveal how sanitation was embedded in broader understandings of gender, fertility, and the body. Yet, despite cultural differences, one pattern emerges universally. Women in ancient civilizations consistently had fewer opportunities for privacy and convenience than men. This imbalance shaped daily routines, safety, and dignity. In societies where women had limited access to sanitation, either due to modesty expectations or restricted movement, health risks increased. Urinary infections, dehydration, and social exclusion were genuine consequences. Understanding gendered sanitation practices sheds light on the lived experiences of half the ancient population, experiences often overlooked in historical narratives focused on public monuments and political elites. But gender is only one dimension. To grasp ancient bathroom culture completely, we must now explore how architecture and engineering shaped the spaces where people relieved themselves, from palace latrines and household toilets to massive public bathhouses and multi-seat latrine halls. To understand the full evolution of ancient bathroom culture, we must shift from materials and rituals to the physical spaces where people relieved themselves. Bathroom architecture across ancient civilizations varied wildly, from simple pits dug into the earth to carved stone seats, elaborate multi-seat latrines, and advanced flushing systems that foreshadowed modern plumbing. The architecture of ancient toilets not only solved practical problems, but also reflected cultural values, technological capabilities, and urban planning priorities. If you want to understand what mattered to a civilization, look at what kind of toilet it built. Let's begin where some of the world's earliest toilet architecture appears: ancient Mesopotamia. Homes in cities like Ur and Babylon often included small designated toilet rooms made of mud brick or baked brick. These rooms contained a simple ceramic or stone seat placed over a vertical shaft. The shaft led either to a cesspit beneath the house or to a drainage channel lined with waterproof plaster. Wealthier homes had more refined versions, sometimes featuring curved seats or decorated walls. What's striking is that even in modest homes, toilets were built indoors. This shows an early recognition of privacy and practicality. Instead of going outdoors or using chamber pots, Mesopotamians integrated toileting into daily domestic architecture, a surprisingly modern concept for a civilization that flourished 4 millennia ago. From Mesopotamia, we move to one of the most advanced sanitation architectures of the ancient world, the Indus Valley Civilization. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa featured astonishingly standardized bathroom layouts. Nearly every home had a dedicated bathing area and a toilet space connected to a terracotta pipe or brick-lined drain. These drains ran beneath the streets, forming an underground sewer network unparalleled for its time. Toilets in the Indus Valley were often simple: a platform with a hole built over a sloping drain. Water poured from a jar could carry waste into the sewer. This early form of flushing, unseen elsewhere at this scale until thousands of years later, demonstrates a civic commitment to hygiene and infrastructure. Public sanitation was not reserved for elites. Even poorer homes had access to drainage systems. The architecture of Indus toilets also reveals a level of urban planning sophistication rarely matched by contemporary civilizations. Streets were laid out in grids, with main sewers running beneath primary roads and smaller drains branching off into residential areas. Engineers included inspection holes for maintenance and designed slopes to ensure water movement. This wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate, coordinated system, functional, sustainable, and remarkably efficient. Now, contrast this with ancient Egypt, where bathroom architecture varied based on class and environment. Wealthy Egyptians sometimes had toilet rooms made of limestone, complete with seats shaped like modern toilet chairs. These toilets sat above ceramic pots filled with sand or straw to absorb odor. The pots were emptied regularly by household workers. Poorer families used simpler setups, either holes in the ground, clay pots, or open areas near their homes. Privacy barriers, such as screens or partial walls, offered modest protection. Interestingly, Egyptian homes often included built-in benches or cubicles that doubled as toilet areas and storage spaces. These multi-use rooms reflect both architectural efficiency and a cultural emphasis on privacy. Turning to ancient Greece, bathroom architecture becomes more communal. Greek public latrines were often built as annexes to bathhouses or gymnasiums. They consisted of long benches carved from stone or marble, with evenly spaced circular holes. Beneath the benches ran water channels designed to remove waste. A second water channel ran at the user's feet, allowing them to rinse cleaning tools. Unlike the private toilets of Mesopotamia or Egypt, these Greek latrines encouraged open social toileting. Men sat side by side, sometimes discussing philosophy or politics, as waste was carried away below. This design emphasizes the Greek belief in communal life. Privacy was not a priority. Social engagement was. Greek homes, however, usually lacked sophisticated indoor toilets. People relied on chamber pots, which were emptied into streets or designated dumping areas. Public sanitation thus played a much larger role. Then come the Romans, who built some of the most iconic and ambitious bathroom architecture of the ancient world. Roman public latrines were feats of engineering and social design. Constructed of stone adorned with mosaics and positioned near forums, markets, and bathhouses, these facilities often featured rows of carved stone seats, continuous water channels for flushing, foot gutters for rinsing, decorated walls and floors. Some latrines contained up to 50 seats arranged in a U-shape, encouraging conversation and interaction. There were no walls between seats. Privacy was simply not part of the design. Household toilets in Rome varied. In wealthy homes, private toilets were sometimes built near kitchens, allowing waste to flow into household drains, an arrangement that today seems unpleasant but made sense within Roman engineering. Poorer homes relied on chamber pots, which slaves or servants emptied into street gutters. An interesting architectural detail of Roman latrines is the lack of partitions. Privacy was unnecessary because toileting was viewed as a routine bodily function, not a shameful act. However, this openness created hygiene challenges. Splashback, odors, and proximity to others' waste made public latrines breeding grounds for disease. Despite this, the architectural ambition behind Roman sanitation remains extraordinary. Meanwhile, in ancient China, bathroom architecture was more varied. Some early dynasties used simple pit latrines lined with wood or clay, but by the Han period, more complex installations appeared, including stone or ceramic seats mounted above a pit or basin. In wealthy homes, toilets might include water bowls for rudimentary flushing. Chinese toilets were often positioned away from the main house to reduce smells and impurity. Later periods saw even more sophisticated designs, including toilets with built-in drainage and privacy partitions. Architecture reflected Confucian values, modesty, cleanliness, and separation of bodily functions from sacred or social spaces. In Japan, early toilets were typically wooden structures built over pits or streams. Their placement reflected Shinto beliefs about purity, positioning toilets far from living areas and sacred sites. Japanese toilet architecture emphasized natural decomposition, and later innovations included raised platforms and bamboo piping. In Mesoamerica, architectural complexity varied. The Maya typically built homes from perishable materials, and their sanitation structures reflected this. Latrines were simple pits or enclosed areas near the home. However, elite compounds sometimes included designated waste chambers that drained into natural sinkholes. These sinkholes, or cenotes, functioned as disposal points, but also carried religious significance, creating a tension between practical waste disposal and spiritual reverence. The Aztecs, with their urban engineering, developed structured waste zones, often located outside residential areas. Homes sometimes included small chambers or privacy screens for toileting, but large architectural toilets were rare. Instead, the emphasis was on city-wide waste collection, not on individual toilet rooms. And this brings us to a broader truth. The architecture of ancient bathroom spaces was always shaped by larger cultural priorities. Civilizations that valued communal life built communal toilets. Civilizations that valued purity built separate private spaces. Civilizations that valued engineering created vast sewer networks. Civilizations that valued sustainability reused waste as fertilizer. Architectural choices reveal what mattered most, whether privacy, efficiency, cleanliness, or practicality. Yet bathroom architecture was only half the story. The next essential question is, how did ancient people deal with the sensory realities of using the bathroom? Smell, noise, filth, danger, and atmosphere shaped the experience more than architecture alone. Ancient toilets were not quiet, sanitized spaces. They were noisy, smelly, sometimes dangerous environments that carried real risks, from animal infestations to disease and even fires caused by methane gases. Understanding the sensory world of ancient bathrooms adds a vivid human layer to our exploration. When we imagine ancient bathrooms, we often project modern expectations onto them. Clean spaces, controlled odors, tidy surfaces, and running water. But the sensory experience of using a toilet in the ancient world was dramatically different. It involved smells, sounds, textures, and risks that today would seem unimaginable. Understanding these sensory realities helps reconstruct daily life far more vividly than architecture alone ever could. One of the most universal challenges across ancient civilizations was odor. Human waste, especially when concentrated in one place, produces strong and persistent smells. Without modern ventilation or chemical cleaners, controlling odor was an ongoing struggle. Ancient latrines, whether a simple pit behind a home or a massive Roman public toilet, produced smells that permeated surrounding areas. Archaeological findings in places like Pompeii suggest that even well-designed sewer systems struggled to contain odor. Streets could smell of sewage, especially in densely populated districts where chamber pots were emptied into gutters. The Romans developed some creative solutions. They placed perfumed oils, flowers, and incense burners near toilet areas. They also allowed continuous water flow beneath the seats, not only to move waste along, but to dilute and somewhat reduce the smell. Still, a Roman latrine was far from pleasant by modern standards. Visitors often described them as reeking spaces, filled not just with human waste, but with humidity, steam from nearby baths, and the odor of shared cleaning sponges. In Greece, smells were managed primarily through flowing water channels in public latrines, but household toilets often relied on chamber pots emptied into the street, leading to foul-smelling neighborhoods in poorer districts. Odor was such a constant presence that Greek literature occasionally jokes about the smells encountered in certain parts of the city. The lack of privacy and the communal nature of Greek sanitation meant that people were accustomed to these sensory experiences. They were part of the texture of everyday life. The Indus Valley civilization, with its advanced drainage system, managed odor more effectively than most ancient societies. Because waste was carried away beneath covered drains, and because homes were equipped with built-in bathroom areas, smells were minimized compared to other regions. Yet even there, the hot climate and close living conditions meant that waste pits and open drains could become odorous during dry seasons. In ancient Egypt, the use of sand or ash to cover waste in pots helped reduce odor in elite homes. But for the majority of Egyptians who used simple pits or containers, smell was a regular part of life. Egyptian texts do not reference toilets directly, perhaps due to cultural taboos, but artistic depictions of daily life avoid the subject entirely, hinting at its association with impurity. That does not mean Egyptians lived devoid of smells, rather, they simply accepted them as part of reality. In ancient China, pit latrines were notorious for their strong smells. Travelers wrote about unpleasant odors near communal pits, and some ancient medical texts warned of poisonous vapors rising from toilet areas. Despite this, the Chinese took steps to mitigate odors. Ash, soil, or lime was sometimes sprinkled into pits to speed decomposition. Certain dynasties built more sophisticated systems with stone basins or shallow water pits beneath seats, which helped reduce immediate smells but did not eliminate them entirely. The Aztecs handled odor in one of the most effective ways of all ancient societies. They removed waste from the city rapidly and systematically. Night soil collectors moved through the canal system, taking waste away before it accumulated. This not only kept the city visually clean, but also significantly reduced lingering smells. Spanish conquistadors arriving in Tenochtitlan were astonished to find a city that, despite its size, lacked the overwhelming odors common in European cities of the same time. Another sensory element often overlooked was noise. Ancient latrines were social places full of voices, conversations, laughter, and the unmistakable sounds of bodily functions. Without walls or partitions, noises echoed. The Romans did not seem embarrassed by this. Humor and conversation were part of the latrine scene. Travelers described echoing chambers filled with chatter and the sound of flowing water. In contrast, societies that valued modesty, such as ancient China or Japan, created quieter, more private spaces, though even there the sounds of relieving oneself were part of everyday experience. The absence of modern plumbing meant that sounds were more noticeable and sometimes uncomfortable, especially for women, who often relieved themselves outdoors or in semi-enclosed spaces where noise could travel. Danger was another important sensory factor. Ancient toilets were not safe places. Public latrines could harbor rats, insects, and even snakes, which sometimes emerged from sewer channels. Roman writers occasionally mentioned the terror of something slithering up from the darkness beneath a latrine seat. Without traps or sealed plumbing systems, animals moved freely in sewer networks. Even worse, the buildup of methane and other gases in ancient sewers created real hazards. Archaeological excavations show that some toilets were located near kitchens, where open flames were common. This combination could lead to fires or explosions. Ancient people did not understand chemical gases, but they recognized certain latrines as dangerous and approached them cautiously. Lighting was another sensory element that shaped the bathroom experience. Many toilets were dim or completely dark. Roman latrines often had minimal lighting due to the layout of public buildings. In Egypt, pit latrines attached to homes were often windowless. In Mesopotamia, indoor toilets relied on small oil lamps. Using the bathroom at night could be difficult and risky, especially in urban settings where pits or uneven ground posed hazards. The experience of touch also differed vastly from modern times. Without toilet paper, people used pottery shards, sponges, leaves, snow, cloth, or stones. Some of these materials were rough and could cause discomfort or injury. Even in societies that used water, such as India or parts of East Asia, cold water, rough surfaces, or improvised tools made the experience far from luxurious. Smell, sound, danger, and discomfort were universal across ancient sanitation, but cultural attitudes determined how people accepted or mitigated these realities. In Rome and Greece, the communal nature of toilets normalized these sensory challenges. In China and Japan, beliefs about purity influenced the design of quieter, more secluded spaces. In the Indus Valley, engineering innovations minimized sensory discomfort. In Mesoamerica, efficient waste removal reduced odors at a city-wide scale, but sensory details only tell part of the story. To truly understand ancient bathroom practices, we must examine the surprising ways toilets intersected with religion, spirituality, and the supernatural. In many civilizations, bathrooms were not merely physical spaces, they were places filled with symbolic meaning, divine rules, and even fear of spirits lurking in the shadows. To truly understand ancient bathroom culture, we must step into an unexpected dimension of daily life, the religious and spiritual world surrounding bodily functions. For many civilizations, relieving oneself was not merely a natural act. It was entangled with ideas of purity, taboo, divine order, and the boundaries between the human and the sacred. Toilets were practical structures, but they were also symbolic spaces where people confronted impurity, danger, and the unseen world. In several ancient cultures, bathrooms were believed to be spiritually vulnerable places. When a person relieved themselves, they were physically exposed, unable to defend themselves, and in contact with substances associated with impurity. This vulnerability created a fertile environment for mythologies and rituals that shaped where and how people went to the bathroom. One of the most striking examples comes from ancient Mesopotamia. The Mesopotamians believed that malevolent spirits lived in dirty water, drains, and dark enclosed spaces. Toilets, therefore, were seen as potential gateways for demons. Some Mesopotamian spells and incantations specifically mention protective charms to safeguard individuals while relieving themselves. Archaeologists have found amulets placed near bathroom areas, indicating a desire to shield households from the forces thought to dwell beneath the ground. These beliefs explain why many Mesopotamian toilets were isolated in corner rooms or built on upper floors. They were architectural attempts to physically and spiritually contain impurity. In ancient Egypt, purity was central to religious practice. Bodily functions were natural, but waste was associated with disorder and chaos. Some texts link the act of elimination to Seth, the god of chaos and storms. This symbolic association gave bathroom practices a spiritual undertone. Egyptians maintained high levels of personal cleanliness, bathing frequently and using perfumed oils, but they avoided discussing toilets openly. Artistic depictions of daily life omit bathroom scenes entirely, suggesting a cultural reluctance to visually record something considered impure or improper to represent. Yet their practical hygiene habits indicate a nuanced relationship with cleanliness, where impurity was controlled through ritual and routine rather than denied entirely. In ancient Israel, toileting was tightly bound to concepts of holiness. Biblical law instructed people to relieve themselves outside the camp and to bury their waste, not only for practical hygiene, but also because waste left uncovered was considered an affront to God's presence. These laws framed sanitation as a moral and religious duty. The act of covering waste became an expression of reverence, a way to maintain spiritual order. This fusion of practical and symbolic purity shaped Jewish sanitation practices for centuries. Hindu traditions in ancient India also linked toileting to cosmic balance. Waste was regarded as a powerful impurity capable of disrupting ritual states. Specific guidelines directed where and when people could relieve themselves. Toilets were to be placed away from sacred spaces, kitchens, and areas of daily worship. Water was used for cleansing, not just because it was effective, but because of its symbolic association with purification. These rules were rooted in a worldview that saw bodily functions as part of a larger spiritual cycle requiring careful management. In Buddhist monastic traditions, sanitation was approached with mindfulness rather than taboo. Early monasteries included structured latrine buildings, often located at a distance from meditation halls and sleeping quarters. Monks followed guidelines for maintaining cleanliness, disposing of waste, and washing afterward. These practices were not motivated by fear of impurity, but by an ethical commitment to discipline, order, and respect for the community. Cleanliness became an expression of mindfulness, reinforcing the monastic ideal of harmony with one's surroundings. In East Asia, spiritual concepts shaped sanitation in distinct ways. Traditional Chinese beliefs associated dark, enclosed spaces with ghosts and harmful energies. Toilets, especially outdoor pit latrines, were seen as places where spirits could lurk. Some households placed talismans or charms near bathroom entrances. Others burned incense to purify the air and repel negative forces. These beliefs intertwined with practical concerns. The smell and darkness of toilets made them unsettling places, reinforcing the perception of spiritual danger. Shinto beliefs in Japan emphasized purity and pollution as opposing forces that shaped the human relationship with nature and the divine. Waste was seen as a form of impurity requiring careful management. Toilets were often placed far from living areas, and hand-washing became an important ritual act of purification. Over time, these cultural values laid the foundation for Japan's meticulous sanitation standards, where purity and cleanliness remain intertwined with spiritual sensibilities. In ancient Greece, attitudes toward bathroom spirituality were more relaxed, but not entirely absent. Greeks saw bodily functions as natural, yet they also believed that certain impurities could disrupt ritual activities. Before entering temples or participating in sacred rites, individuals cleansed themselves. However, Greeks did not treat toilet spaces as spiritually hazardous in the same way as other cultures. Instead, they accepted them as part of mundane human life. This practical attitude can be seen in their communal latrine architecture, where philosophical conversation could occur beside an open drain. Rome presents an intriguing combination of practicality and superstition. On one hand, Romans built sophisticated sanitation systems. On the other, they feared dangers lurking in sewers. The belief that spirits or creatures inhabited the underworld beneath latrine seats was widespread. Some latrines included images of Fortuna or other protective deities carved into the walls. These symbols provided psychological comfort in a space where physical and spiritual vulnerability combined. Roman texts occasionally warn of demons or monsters rising from sewers, reflecting the anxieties associated with dark, hidden environments. Fire hazards caused by methane buildup likely reinforced these fears, lending real danger to a spiritually charged idea. In the Americas, spiritual beliefs also shaped bathroom habits. Among the Maya, waste disposal sometimes involved ritual practices, especially when linked to elite households or ceremonial centers. The Aztecs, while highly practical in their sanitation systems, associated certain forms of waste with ritual impurity. The enforcement of sanitation laws was both civic and spiritual, intended to maintain cosmic order within the city. Even among tribal and nomadic cultures, toilets held symbolic significance. Some believed that spirits could use waste to harm a person, compelling individuals to bury or conceal their waste carefully. Others believed that returning waste to the earth was an act of respect toward nature. Across all these civilizations, a shared pattern emerges. Ancient people connected bodily elimination with spiritual vulnerability. Toilets were not merely functional spaces, they were thresholds between cleanliness and impurity, order and chaos, safety and danger. Rituals, laws, architecture, and taboos all attempted to control forces, both physical and supernatural, believed to emanate from human waste. This spiritual dimension gives us a deeper understanding of ancient life. It shows how people interpreted the most basic human acts through the lens of their cosmology. It reveals how sanitation connected to religion, morality, identity, and the unseen world. Now that we've explored the symbolic and spiritual layers of ancient bathroom culture, another aspect awaits: how ancient people cleaned, maintained, and operated their toilets and sanitation structures. In other words, who did the dirty work? And how did societies organize the essential labor behind sanitation? Behind every ancient toilet, every sewer system, every waste pit and drainage channel, there was someone responsible for cleaning it. Sanitation, no matter how sophisticated or primitive, required labor. And across ancient civilizations, sanitation work revealed striking truths about social hierarchy, class divisions, and the people whose contributions were essential to public health, yet rarely recorded in history. Ancient sanitation labor was often dangerous, physically demanding, and socially stigmatized. It was the kind of work that sustained entire cities but earned little recognition. In many cases, the individuals who cleaned toilets and carried waste lived on the margins of society. Yet their efforts prevented disease, maintained order, and kept communities functioning. Understanding the lives of these workers adds depth to our understanding of ancient sanitation systems and the human reality behind them. One of the most documented examples of sanitation labor comes from ancient Rome, where the enormous scale of public latrines and sewer systems demanded constant maintenance. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer, required teams of workers known as cloacini. These workers entered sewer tunnels to remove blockages, clear debris, and keep water flowing. The work was dangerous. Sewers were dark, narrow, and filled with toxic gases. Collapses were common. Rats and snakes thrived in these spaces. Yet without these workers, Rome's sanitation system would quickly fail. Roman latrine attendants played another role. They maintained public toilets, supplied water for the troughs, and ensured the sponges used for wiping were cleaned. Because latrines were social centers as well as functional spaces, attendants also managed the crowd, helped patrons, and sometimes enforced informal etiquette. They were essential staff in the daily life of a bustling Roman city. In ancient Greece, sanitation workers performed similar tasks, but on a smaller scale. Public latrines needed cleaning, chamber pots required emptying, and street gutters had to be cleared of waste and rainwater. Some Greek cities had official workers assigned to these tasks, others relied on enslaved individuals or hired laborers. The work was considered low status, but its importance was understood. A failure to manage waste properly could lead to terrible smells, contaminated water, or disease outbreaks. Moving to ancient Egypt, sanitation responsibilities often fell to servants, laborers, or enslaved workers. Elite households employed people specifically to empty toilet pots, transport waste, and bury it in designated locations. These workers maintained household cleanliness, ensuring that the wealthy remained separated from the unpleasant realities of waste management. Meanwhile, in urban neighborhoods, municipal workers collected waste and maintained public areas. Yet ancient Egyptian records say little about these workers, suggesting their social position was considered unremarkable or invisible. In the Indus Valley civilization, the level of sanitation infrastructure suggests an organized workforce dedicated to maintaining drains, clearing blockages, and managing sewage flow. Covered drains required periodic cleaning, which would have been performed by workers using inspection openings built directly into the streets. These maintenance features indicate a planned system in which sanitation was part of civic administration. What remains unknown is whether these workers were publicly funded employees or part of a household labor class. Regardless, their role was crucial to sustaining one of the world's earliest urban sanitation networks. In ancient China, sanitation work became deeply integrated into agricultural cycles. Human waste, considered valuable fertilizer, was collected by workers sometimes referred to as night soil carriers. These individuals traveled through towns and cities, emptying household buckets into large containers that were then transported to farms. This system created a direct link between sanitation and agriculture. The labor was physically demanding, but it played a vital role in sustaining food production. It also contributed to China's long-term agricultural stability, allowing densely populated regions to thrive. Night soil carriers often worked during the early morning or late at night, navigating narrow streets and avoiding crowds. Their job required both strength and endurance. Handling waste was stigmatized, but it provided a steady income, and some municipalities regulated the profession to ensure that carriers followed specific routes and disposal procedures. A similar system emerged in Japan, where waste was collected and reused as fertilizer. The Japanese approach to sanitation integrated ethical, spiritual, and practical values. Waste collectors had clearly defined roles within the community. Some households paid for their services with rice or other goods. In agricultural villages, the relationship between homeowners and waste collectors could be collaborative, benefiting both the farms and the households. In Mesoamerica, sanitation labor reached extraordinary levels of organization, especially in the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. The Aztecs developed one of the most systematic waste collection routines in ancient history. Workers navigated the city's canals in small boats, collecting both human and organic waste each night. They transported this material to fields outside the city where it enriched chinampas, artificial agricultural islands that fed the population. This innovative approach resulted in a clean, odor-controlled city that impressed European visitors. These sanitation workers were essential to the city's functioning. Without them, waste would have accumulated in canals, markets, and streets, creating conditions ripe for disease. The Aztec system illustrates how sanitation labor, when organized effectively, could transform urban life on a massive scale. The Maya, facing environmental constraints, handled sanitation differently. Waste disposal often involved pit latrines or dumping areas near residences. Clearing these pits or relocating waste would have fallen to household members or servants. While less centralized than the Aztec system, it required ongoing maintenance to prevent contamination of water sources and living areas. In tribal or nomadic societies, sanitation responsibilities were shared among community members. Camps were often arranged with designated waste zones far from living areas. Because these communities moved frequently, waste was naturally left behind as they traveled. This reduced the need for long-term sanitation labor, but required cultural norms to enforce separation between waste and living spaces. Across all these societies, sanitation work remained a low-status occupation, despite its essential nature. The people who maintained toilets, cleaned drains, and carried waste embodied the invisible labor that kept cities functioning. Their work prevented disease, protected water sources, and sustained agriculture. Yet history rarely names them. There is another dimension to sanitation labor that shaped ancient life: the impact of caste, class, and social hierarchy. In India, for example, caste systems played a major role in determining who performed waste-related tasks. Certain castes were restricted to sanitation labor, a practice that continued for centuries and influenced social structures in profound ways. Similarly, in many ancient societies, enslaved individuals, prisoners, or marginalized groups were assigned sanitation duties as part of their social position. Despite the stigma, sanitation workers developed expertise. They knew how to manage decomposition, control odors, prevent flooding, and maintain drainage. Their skills were passed down through generations, even if unacknowledged by elites. Understanding the lives of sanitation workers gives us insight into the human backbone of ancient civilizations. These workers maintained the health and order that cities depended on. Without them, even the greatest architectural achievements of the ancient world would have been overshadowed by disease and environmental collapse. But sanitation labor did more than keep cities clean. It also shaped the rhythms of daily life. It influenced how households functioned, how neighborhoods were organized, and how cities grew. And as we explore the next chapter of this story, we see how ancient sanitation practices influenced not only daily routines, but the entire structure of urban development and population growth. To truly grasp how ancient civilizations functioned, we must understand how sanitation shaped their cities, their growth, and even their survival. Urban sanitation was not merely a background detail of ancient life. It was one of the foundational elements determining whether a settlement thrived or collapsed. Waste management influenced population density, architecture, public health, trade, and social order. In many ways, the trajectory of ancient cities can be traced through their toilets and drainage systems. Early human settlements could afford simple sanitation practices. Small villages typically relieved themselves in open fields, forest edges, or shallow pits dug near dwellings. Waste decomposed naturally, and the distance between homes reduced contamination. But as populations grew and settlements became more permanent, waste accumulated faster than nature could break it down. This shift from rural to urban life created an unprecedented challenge. For the first time in human history, cities needed to find systematic ways to handle human waste. The Indus Valley civilization stands out as a remarkable early success in urban sanitation. Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were home to tens of thousands of people, yet their cities remained orderly and well-maintained. Their underground drainage systems, standardized building bricks, and carefully planned streets allowed waste to be channeled away from homes efficiently. This innovation enabled high population density without overwhelming the environment. Urban growth was sustainable because sanitation was integrated into the city's architecture from the beginning. This approach contrasts sharply with many other ancient civilizations, where sanitation lagged behind urban expansion. In ancient Mesopotamia, cities like Babylon grew rapidly, but their sanitation infrastructure struggled to keep pace. Overcrowded neighborhoods often relied on cesspits that overflowed during rainy seasons. Waste sometimes seeped into wells or canals, contributing to disease outbreaks. Urban planners were aware of these problems, yet geography and water scarcity limited their ability to implement large-scale solutions. Still, Mesopotamian drainage innovations were impressive compared to contemporary societies, and their efforts helped support some of the earliest metropolitan populations. In ancient Egypt, cities grew along the Nile, a river that shaped sanitation practices profoundly. The river was both a source of life and a repository for waste. Many Egyptians disposed of waste near fields, where it decomposed quickly in the dry climate. Urban disposal was more challenging. Without sewers, Egyptians relied on household servants to remove chamber pots and bury waste outside the city. Egyptian cities remained relatively small and spread out compared to Mesopotamian or Indus settlements, partly because dense urban living was less feasible without advanced sanitation. Instead, Egyptian civilization expressed its greatness through monumental architecture rather than massive population centers. The Greeks learned early that sanitation played a crucial role in maintaining urban health. Cities like Athens incorporated drainage channels into street designs, allowing runoff to flow toward rivers or the sea. Public latrines were built in conjunction with bathhouses, connecting cleanliness with civic life. Although Greek cities lacked sewers comparable to Rome's later systems, their partial solutions allowed urban densities that supported vibrant marketplaces, theaters, and public assemblies. Sanitation enabled the flourishing of urban culture. It was ancient Rome, however, that elevated sanitation into a defining feature of urban civilization. Rome's population may have exceeded 1 million, a scale unmatched in Europe for well over 1,000 years. Supporting such a dense population required sophisticated infrastructure. Aqueducts supplied fresh water, fountains distributed it across the city, and sewers carried waste away. The Cloaca Maxima drained not only human waste, but also storm water, reducing flooding and foul stagnation. Roman urban planners understood that sanitation was a prerequisite for growth. Without it, a city of Rome's size would have been unlivable. Roman colonies replicated this pattern. Cities from North Africa to Britain were equipped with public baths, latrines, and drainage systems. The empire spread sanitation technology wherever it established control. This diffusion of infrastructure shaped the development of provincial cities, enabling them to grow beyond what local technologies might have allowed. But Roman sanitation also revealed limitations. Sewers often discharged into rivers or the sea, polluting waterways. Public toilets could become health hazards if not maintained. Even with impressive engineering, sanitation challenges persisted in densely populated zones. In ancient China, a different kind of city emerged, one sustained not by sewers, but by agricultural recycling. Human waste, treated as fertilizer, was removed from households and transported to fields. This sustainable cycle allowed Chinese cities to grow without overwhelming their surroundings. Waste pits were designed for easy access, and night soil carriers formed an integral part of urban life. This approach influenced population growth profoundly. Because human waste enriched the soil, farmers could support larger populations, which in turn allowed cities to expand. The system created a feedback loop. Sanitation supported agriculture supported people, and people supported urban centers. Ancient Chinese cities were not without sanitary challenges. Pit latrines could contaminate groundwater, and unlined waste pits in densely populated areas posed health risks. Yet the overall system was remarkably effective for its time. It reveals a civilization deeply attuned to long-term ecological balance. In Japan, sanitation influenced settlement patterns in more subtle ways. Early Japanese villages built latrines away from homes to preserve purity. Over time, these practices evolved into sophisticated waste recycling systems that supported rice agriculture. Population centers could grow because sanitation supported food production. The integration of hygiene, spirituality, and agriculture enabled Japanese cities to maintain balance and order. In Mesoamerica, urban sanitation shaped the rise and success of great civilizations. The Maya, limited by limestone geology, built cities with open plazas, drainage channels, and waste pits. These solutions allowed their cities to grow despite environmental constraints. But it was the Aztecs who pushed sanitation to new heights. Tenochtitlan, a city built on a lake, required extraordinary waste management. The Aztecs developed public waste zones, night soil collection, and agricultural recycling. This system supported an enormous population, perhaps 200,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the world at the time. Spanish observers were astonished at Tenochtitlan's cleanliness. Its markets, streets, and canals were free of litter and waste, a feat achieved through meticulous organization. Urban sanitation allowed the Aztec capital to flourish as a center of commerce, art, and political power. While sanitation supported urban growth, it also shaped social structure. In many ancient cities, access to toilets varied by class. Wealthy households had private facilities, while commoners relied on shared or public spaces. This division influenced where people lived, how neighborhoods developed, and what daily routines looked like. A family with a private toilet avoided the inconvenience of walking to a public latrine. A poor family might live closer to communal facilities or waste zones, exposing them to smells and crowding. In some societies, such as Rome, the presence of public toilets fostered social interaction. In others, such as the Indus Valley, the emphasis on private household sanitation fostered a different kind of social structure, one where personal cleanliness was integrated into domestic life. Sanitation also influenced public order. Clean streets reduced disease and prevented nuisances that could lead to unrest. City officials monitored waste disposal, imposed fines, and established rules for managing refuse. These administrative practices contributed to the development of civic government itself. In this way, the story of ancient toilets intersects with the story of early political administration. But the history of sanitation also includes failure. When sewage systems were neglected, when populations outgrew infrastructure, or when cities were hit by droughts or floods, waste could accumulate and cause disaster. Some ancient cities declined in part because their sanitation systems could not keep up with their growth. The interplay between sanitation and urban development reveals a simple truth. The success of a city depended not only on its monuments, armies, or rulers, but on its ability to handle something as mundane as human waste. Now that we understand how sanitation shaped urban life, we can explore another important dimension: the technological innovations that transformed bathroom practices, from early clay pipes to flushing mechanisms, drainage grids, and portable toilets that spread across empires. As ancient civilizations grew, so did the need for innovation. Bathroom technology, often overlooked in grand histories, was one of the most important advancements that allowed cities to flourish. These innovations ranged from simple architectural improvements to complex engineering systems. Each invention solved specific problems, and each one reveals the ingenuity of people confronting the most basic human challenge: how to manage waste safely and efficiently. One of the earliest technological breakthroughs in sanitation was the development of the drainage channel. In ancient Mesopotamia, simple gutters ran alongside streets, carrying wastewater away from homes. Over time, these channels became more refined. Builders lined them with bricks, plastered them with waterproof material, and covered them with stone slabs. These improvements prevented contamination, protected the channels from debris, and allowed cities to function during rainy seasons. But the most impressive early drainage technology came from the Indus Valley civilization. Their engineers designed a true sewer network, complete with sloped pipes, settlement chambers, and standardized construction materials. The use of uniform, kiln-fired bricks allowed precise fits, ensuring that drains could be sealed and maintained. Some drains even included sediment traps, small chambers that collected debris so it could be removed manually. These features show an understanding of hydraulic principles far ahead of their time. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Indus system was how it integrated toilets into an overall plan. Water jars were used to flush waste from household platforms into the drains. In effect, this was an early form of plumbing. While not a flush toilet in the modern sense, it demonstrated an understanding of how flowing water could remove waste. In ancient Egypt, where water scarcity shaped daily life, waste management technologies were more modest. Yet Egyptians developed portable toilets that were surprisingly sophisticated. These seats, made of limestone or wood, rested on top of pottery vessels filled with sand. The sand absorbed moisture and reduced odor. When full, the vessels were removed and cleaned. This simple but effective system was widely used in elite households. The design even anticipated later commode chairs, popular in Europe centuries later. Moving to ancient Greece, we find important contributions to public sanitation. The Greeks developed rudimentary flushing mechanisms for public latrines. Water runoff from bathhouses was directed beneath benches, carrying waste into drainage channels. Greek engineers also experimented with clay pipes to transport wastewater underground. Although these systems were not as extensive as Rome's later sewers, they laid the foundation for communal sanitation in urban environments. It was the Romans, however, who transformed bathroom technology into a discipline of monumental engineering. Roman aqueducts brought fresh water from distant sources into cities, feeding fountains, baths, and latrines. This abundant water supply enabled continuous flushing in public toilets. Waste was moved along channels by gravity, flowing into large sewers like the Cloaca Maxima. Roman latrines introduced several innovations. Stone seats were shaped ergonomically, with openings designed for comfort. Water channels beneath the seats removed waste quickly, reducing smell and standing filth. A second water channel in front of the seats allowed for rinsing the sponge sticks used for wiping. This dual-channel system showcased an understanding of hygiene far beyond what might be expected in the ancient world. Roman builders also developed venting techniques, though not always successfully. They created openings in latrine walls or ceilings to allow gases to escape. Yet methane buildup remained a hazard, and sewer explosions or fires were not uncommon. Despite the risks, Roman sanitation technology represented one of the greatest engineering achievements of the ancient world. The Romans were also pioneers in portable sanitation. Wealthy families sometimes used chamber pots made of bronze, ceramic, or even silver, bearing artistic inscriptions or decorations. Portable latrines were used during banquets, in military camps, and on long journeys. The Roman army, in particular, relied on standardized latrine trenches dug outside encampments. Soldiers built wooden seats over these trenches or simply squatted in designated areas. These temporary toilets were placed at strict distances from wells and kitchens, reflecting an early military understanding of sanitation and disease prevention. In ancient China, technological innovation took a different path. Rather than building massive sewer networks, Chinese engineers developed devices that supported waste reuse. Some toilets included water basins to flush waste into storage pits. Others suspended seats over stone-lined pits that decomposed waste naturally. During the Han Dynasty, some elite homes developed early forms of water toilets, carved from stone that drained into underground chambers. Chinese sanitation technology was uniquely adapted to agricultural cycles, with toilets positioned near gardens or fields to facilitate waste collection. In Japan, the evolution of the toilet shows a gradual refinement of design principles. Early structures were simple wooden huts placed over pits. Over time, builders introduced raised floors, ventilation systems, and water channels. The development of the benjo, early Japanese toilet, reflected cultural values of purity and order. By the medieval period, Japanese toilets often included bamboo pipes or stone channels that allowed water to carry waste away. These innovations foreshadowed the country's modern reputation for advanced toilet technology. In the Americas, ancient civilizations developed their own forms of sanitation engineering. The Maya built drainage channels in their cities to carry rainwater away from plazas, reducing standing water and waste accumulation. Their toilet structures were often simple, but positioned strategically to take advantage of natural topography. Maya engineers understood how water flowed through the landscape and designed settlements accordingly. The Aztecs, with their unparalleled system of waste collection and recycling, demonstrate another kind of innovation. Their night soil system was not technological in the modern mechanical sense, but it was engineered through organization, labor, and logistics. Waste collection boats moved through the canals with remarkable efficiency. This system required planning, scheduling, and a division of responsibilities, all hallmarks of sophisticated urban engineering. It was a sanitation technology based not on pipes or sewers, but on human coordination. In Northern Europe, simple but effective technologies appeared in early medieval settlements. Wooden or stone-lined latrine pits were common. Some included seats carved into planks or tree trunks. Viking settlements, for example, used latrine pits insulated with layers of turf or ash to reduce smell. Ash served as both deodorizer and desiccant. These pits were periodically shoveled out and refilled, creating a cycle of waste removal that supported growing populations in harsh climates. Across all these innovations, a pattern becomes clear. Bathroom technology evolved not only through engineering but through cultural necessity. Societies solved sanitation challenges using the resources they had: clay, stone, wood, water, ash, labor, and ingenuity. Innovations spread when trade, conquest, or migration carried ideas from one culture to another. One of the most fascinating ideas that spread across civilizations was the concept of flushing, using water to remove waste efficiently. Early examples include the Indus Valley's water-poured toilets and the Greeks' use of bathhouse runoff. Romans perfected large-scale flushing with aqueduct-fed latrines. In China, small-scale flushing appeared in elite households. The principle was the same everywhere: flowing water made waste disappear quickly. Yet the technological ambition behind flushing also reveals something deeper. Civilizations that attempted flushing toilets were those that recognized the value of cleanliness, comfort, and public order. They sought to separate humans from their waste as efficiently as possible. The desire for a cleaner, healthier living environment drove innovation before science could explain why. Now that we've explored the technological side of ancient toilets, it's time to examine a final dimension: daily life. How often did people use these facilities? What was the routine like? How did children learn bathroom habits? How did travelers handle sanitation on the road? And how did people experience these acts in the flow of everyday living? These questions bring ancient sanitation down to the most personal level, revealing the rhythms of ordinary life in civilizations long gone. It is one thing to understand ancient toilets as structures or technologies. It is another to understand how people actually used them in daily life. Sanitation, after all, is a routine part of human existence. What did a typical person do when nature called? How did children learn proper behavior? How did travelers relieve themselves on long journeys? These ordinary, intimate behaviors reveal far more about ancient societies than any monument or written law. To begin, imagine daily life in a crowded ancient city: Rome, Thebes, Athens, Babylon, Chang'an, or Tenochtitlan. These places pulsed with human activity from sunrise to sunset. Markets bustled, workshops clattered, animals roamed, and people came and went in dense crowds. Amid this life, bathroom needs were constant. Ancient people relieved themselves several times a day, just as we do now. The difference lay in the options available to them. In societies with advanced public sanitation, such as Rome or the later cities of China, a person might visit a communal latrine on the way to the market. In Rome, these facilities were strategically placed so that no resident lived far from one. Merchants, soldiers, and travelers used them freely. Because Roman latrines were social spaces, visiting one could become part of the rhythm of a day. People greeted neighbors there, exchanged news, or simply rested their legs on the stone benches. In Egypt or Greece, where public toilets were less common and privacy more valued, many people relied on chamber pots. Using a chamber pot was quick and convenient, requiring little preparation. A person might use it immediately upon waking, then again before bed. Servants, slaves, or lower-status family members emptied these pots into designated areas. This system worked efficiently in households with servants, but poorer families had to handle disposal themselves, carrying pots down narrow streets to dumping sites or open drains. In the Indus Valley, daily routines centered on early morning cleansing. Archaeological evidence suggests that many homes included bathing areas used at dawn. Families likely used toilet platforms before washing themselves and beginning their day. Because privacy was built into domestic architecture, toileting was a quiet, personal activity, separated from the public sphere. In ancient China, daily sanitation varied by class and location. In cities, people used household latrines built over pits. These were usually located outdoors, but within the family courtyard. Using them in the early morning or late evening was common, especially for women and children who spent much of their time at home. In rural villages, men working in the fields relieved themselves in designated outdoor areas, while women used the home latrine. Hand-washing afterward was essential, reflecting cultural values of purity and order. Japan shared similar patterns. Early morning visits to the toilet were part of household routine. Children were taught from a young age to avoid defecating near shrines or communal wells. Households maintained their latrines carefully because cleanliness upheld spiritual harmony. Mesoamerican societies had their own rhythms. In Maya villages, people often used simple pits or designated outdoor areas. Because homes were built from perishable materials and settlements were open, bathroom habits blended naturally into the environment. In the urban Aztec world, however, daily sanitation was more structured. Households used small enclosed areas or pots. Waste collectors visited regularly, creating a predictable cycle of disposal. The people of Tenochtitlan took pride in their clean environment, and neatness became part of everyday civic identity. Children in ancient civilizations learned bathroom habits early. In many cultures, parents instructed children to relieve themselves outdoors or in designated pits until they were old enough to use household or public toilets. There were no diapers as we know them today. Instead, infants were wrapped in cloths that were washed frequently. Toilet training depended heavily on the sanitation structures available. In Rome, children were accustomed to public latrines from a young age. In China and Japan, household pits allowed families to supervise children easily. In nomadic societies, children learned quickly to respect cultural rules about where waste could be deposited. Nighttime bathroom habits were another major part of daily life. Without electric lighting and with dangers in the streets, from thieves to wild animals, many people used chamber pots at night rather than outdoor toilets. Even in Rome, where public latrines stayed functional around the clock due to flowing water, few ordinary citizens ventured out at night. Chamber pots were safer and more convenient. For travelers, relieving themselves depended on geography and infrastructure. Roman roads featured designated spots near inns or posting stations. Soldiers built latrines at temporary camps with remarkable precision, following strict guidelines to prevent disease. In contrast, travelers in Egypt or the Middle East often relieved themselves outdoors, as long as they kept distance from wells and inhabited areas. In China, inns frequently had simple toilet huts, though quality varied significantly. Bathroom habits also reflected social etiquette. In many cultures, relieving oneself near water sources was considered offensive. Ancient texts from India, China, Greece, and the Middle East warn against polluting rivers or wells. Some rules were religious, others practical, but all show that ancient people understood the danger of contamination. Elimination was also shaped by diet. Civilizations with high-fiber diets, such as agricultural societies in China or the Indus Valley, likely had more regular bowel movements. The Roman diet, rich in grains and vegetables, also supported regularity. In contrast, pastoralist cultures consuming primarily meat and dairy may have relieved themselves less frequently, but in different contexts, such as grazing fields or open landscapes. Another aspect of daily sanitation was dealing with illness. Ancient medical texts across civilizations describe digestive problems, parasites, and constipation. Egyptian papyri contain recipes for treating diarrhea. Greek physicians like Hippocrates connected disease with environmental factors, including waste accumulation. Chinese medical texts link bowel habits to the balance of qi. Bathrooms thus became sites not only of elimination, but of self-diagnosis and treatment. Daily sanitation also influenced family routines. In some cultures, bathroom areas were associated with chores like cleaning, hand-washing, and even gardening when waste was used as fertilizer. Women often maintained the household toilet, sweeping ashes into pits, washing cloths, or disinfecting containers with herbs or boiling water. In China and Japan, families sometimes composted waste directly into garden beds, making daily sanitation part of the food cycle. Despite their simplicity, ancient bathroom practices created a sense of rhythm in daily life. Morning cleansing, midday visits to public latrines, nighttime chamber pots, and weekly cleaning rituals punctuated the lives of millions. These rhythms shaped where people walked, how they interacted with neighbors, and how they understood their bodies. But sanitation did not remain static. As civilizations rose and fell, bathroom practices changed dramatically. Some societies advanced their technologies, others regressed. Wars disrupted sanitation systems, trade introduced new materials, religion reshaped beliefs about purity, and environmental pressures forced people to adapt. As we approach the final section of this documentary script, we explore how ancient sanitation practices evolved over time, how later civilizations inherited or rejected ancient methods, and how these early innovations shaped the development of modern toilets and hygiene systems. As we reach the final chapter of this journey through ancient sanitation, one truth becomes clear. Bathroom practices are not trivial footnotes in history. They shaped cities, influenced health, reflected cultural values, and revealed how people understood their place in the world. And as civilizations rose and fell, so too did their sanitation systems. The story of ancient toilets is, in many ways, the story of human progress, uneven, fragile, ingenious, and deeply human. To understand how ancient sanitation evolved, we must look at the broader historical forces that shaped innovation. Conquest, trade, migration, religion, and climate change all played roles in how bathrooms developed or disappeared over time. When the Roman Empire collapsed, its sanitation systems deteriorated with it. Aqueducts fell into disrepair, sewers clogged, and public latrines collapsed or were abandoned. Medieval cities in Europe, lacking the engineering skills and centralized administration of Rome, reverted to far simpler methods. Chamber pots, waste-strewn streets, and open ditches became common. In many medieval towns, waste accumulated so heavily that city officials periodically ordered citizens to shovel filth into rivers or pits. The decline of sanitation contributed to outbreaks of disease, including plagues that devastated populations. This regression demonstrates a key lesson. Technological progress is not linear. Advanced sanitation systems require political stability, economic resources, and coordinated labor. Without these, even the greatest infrastructure can crumble. Rome's sophisticated toilets and sewers did not return to Europe for nearly 1,000 years. In contrast, ancient sanitation practices in Asia continued to evolve. In China, the tradition of using human waste as fertilizer persisted and became increasingly refined. Composting techniques improved, reducing disease risks. Flushable stone toilets in elite homes influenced later designs. The understanding that waste could support agriculture sustained some of the world's densest populations long before modern fertilizers existed. Japan, guided by Shinto values of purity and order, developed a sanitation culture that emphasized cleanliness. While ancient Japanese toilets were simple, the cultural framework that shaped them laid the foundation for the meticulous hygiene practices that Japan is known for today. The Islamic world made significant contributions to sanitation as well. The Quran emphasizes cleanliness, including specific instructions for washing after relieving oneself. Islamic cities developed public baths, fountains, and drainage systems. Travelers from medieval Europe often remarked on the comparative cleanliness of Islamic cities. In many ways, the Islamic world preserved and advanced hygienic practices that Europe had abandoned after Rome's fall. In India, sanitation remained deeply linked to religious and cultural norms. Water-based cleansing became widespread, and ritual purity shaped bathroom habits. At the same time, sanitation work became associated with specific castes, embedding social inequality into the fabric of daily life. These systems persisted for centuries and influenced the development of modern sanitation across the region. In the Americas, the collapse of the Aztec and Inca empires disrupted their sophisticated sanitation systems. Spanish colonizers, unfamiliar with local practices, often replaced or ignored indigenous sanitation structures, leading to declines in cleanliness and public health. Yet the principles underpinning Mesoamerican sanitation, particularly waste recycling, remain relevant to ecological engineering today. Across Africa, sanitation varied widely. In some regions, pit latrines were common and effective. In others, nomadic lifestyles reduced the need for permanent bathrooms. The spread of Islam introduced new hygiene laws, shaping practices across North and West Africa. Archaeological evidence shows that African societies adapted sanitation to suit their environments, often integrating it with agricultural or pastoral systems. Despite differences across continents, the evolution of sanitation shares common themes. When societies were prosperous and politically stable, sanitation advanced. When war, famine, or instability struck, sanitation suffered. This pattern persisted for thousands of years. The invention of modern toilets in the 19th century might seem like a sudden leap forward, but it was built upon the foundations laid by ancient civilizations. The idea of separating humans from waste goes back to the Indus Valley. The principle of flushing with water echoes practices in ancient Greece and Rome. Sewer networks in modern cities evolved from Roman and Mesopotamian designs. Even the use of waste as fertilizer continues traditions from China, Japan, and Mesoamerica. The story of ancient sanitation also reminds us that cultural beliefs shape technology. Some societies prioritized privacy, others valued community, some feared impurity, others saw waste as a resource. These differing values created a rich diversity of bathroom practices across the ancient world. As we reflect on this history, it becomes clear that sanitation is not merely a technical problem, it is a social one. It requires cooperation, shared norms, and a recognition of collective responsibility. Ancient civilizations that understood this thrived. Those that neglected it suffered. And yet, despite all the differences, a humbling truth remains. No matter where or when people lived, whether in the bustling streets of Rome, the orderly neighborhoods of Mohenjo-Daro, the fields of ancient China, or the floating gardens of Tenochtitlan, they all confronted the same universal human need. Going to the bathroom was an act experienced by kings and slaves, farmers and merchants, priests and children. It was a constant reminder of human vulnerability, humility, and shared existence. If anything connects us to the ancient world more than language, architecture, or mythology, it is this deeply human experience. The toilets of the past, whether carved in stone, built from clay, suspended over pits, or flushed with water, tell a story of ingenuity, adaptation, and survival. They reveal how civilizations understood themselves, how they valued cleanliness, how they protected their people, and how they managed the invisible dangers that accompany waste. They show us that progress is built not only on grand achievements, but on everyday routines, and they remind us that behind every great city, behind every empire, behind every temple and monument, lies a system, sometimes crude, sometimes brilliant, built to answer one simple question: where does it all go? The evolution of sanitation is a testament to human creativity. Ancient toilets were more than places to relieve oneself. They were solutions to fundamental problems of life and community. They shaped the course of history in ways most people never consider. And while modern plumbing might feel worlds apart from ancient pits or stone seats, the impulse behind it remains the same: humans striving for a cleaner, healthier, more dignified life.